So it is a challenge because every case in immigration will depend very much on the facts. So going on our case with David, we know that he works for a UK employer and he's going to be seconded to their US subsidiary. So we know there's a corporate relationship. We most likely would be looking at an L1 intercompany transfer, provided that David has worked outside the US for his employer for at least a year. There are some alternatives. We can look at E2s if the UK employer and indeed the US entity is British owned ultimately. So that's something that we'll often do because sometimes that visa is a little bit more flexible and it provides the employer with greater opportunity to send more employees in a faster way. So typically the L1 or the E2 would be the most appropriate visa when an employer wants to send an employee to the United States.
Okay. And specifically, what do you think would be appropriate in David's circumstances?
So again, I think normally I would go through an exercise of determining the ownership of the entity to work it out. I prefer an E2 visa where we can do an E2 visa because it is a longer one. So I think either would be appropriate. Some things that we may consider though might be how long the assignment is. They've said that it is meant to be short term, just a few years. But we know that sometimes a few years turns into a much longer time. So in my opinion, I would probably try first for the E2 visa, which is based again on treaties. So the US has a treaty with the UK, so it would need to be a British owned company ultimately with British shareholders. And it would require a substantial investment in the US, the E2 does. So the company will have needed to have spent money to start up the US entity. If for some reason it doesn't work, because they're not British owned or for any other reasons, maybe they've not made any investment, then the L1 would be the backup option. It just sometimes takes a little bit longer to get and has a little bit more of a uphill challenge.